Roger Federer just revealed something shocking about Alex Eala that no one anticipated. The internet was on fire and fans were divided as a result of the tennis superstar's shocking comments. What was it that he said? And why are people discussing the young Filipino celebrity in a way that they have never done before? This is not merely a casual remark or an endorsement. This is more profound and alters our perception of one of tennis's emerging talents. Federer went there even if no one anticipated him doing so. The world now demands explanations. It took place at a Basel press conference. A question concerning the future of women's tennis was posed to Roger Federer, a man who seldom gets involved in controversy. He hesitated, grinned, and then uttered something that would make headlines for days. He made reference to Alex Eala, but not in the way you might anticipate, not with the customary courteous commendation bestowed upon youthful talents. His voice changed. His voice was filled with worry, perhaps even disappointment. Federer started, "Alex Eala is incredibly talented. However, I'm not sure if she's still playing her own game." There was silence in the room. Journalists looked at each other. By that, what did he mean? Federer went on, cautiously yet intentionally selecting his remarks. He discussed the sponsorship machinery that surrounds young athletes, the pressures they encounter, and the federations who view them more as investments than as unique people. Then he spoke the sentence that would set the internet on fire. Occasionally, those who are meant to keep these gamers safe wind up taking control of them. Additionally, I'm concerned about what I've heard about Alex's circumstances. He did not go into detail. He didn't have to. It was obvious what was implied. In Alex Eala's career, something was going on behind the scenes. Something that was unknown to the general population. Even Roger Federer, who is renowned for avoiding drama, felt obliged to address this. The damage, or the truth, depending on who you ask, was already visible when the news conference ended. The video became viral in a matter of hours. Twitter went crazy. Discussions on Reddit were full with conjecture. Every word Federer said was scrutinized by YouTube outlets. Everyone was asking the same straightforward but complex question. What is the sinister secret of Alex Eala? This was the last kind of attention a young player attempting to make a name for herself on the WTA circuit wanted. However, this story was too significant for the tennis community to overlook. Everyone was curious about what was beyond the door that Federer had opened. But we must go back to the beginning of Alex Eala's narrative in order to comprehend why Federer's remarks struck such a deep chord. Alex Eala is not your average tennis player. Even if it was in the junior division, she is the first Filipino to win a Grand Slam title, making her a national hero and the pride of the Philippines. Her victory in the U.S. Open girls singles competition in 2022 was more than simply a personal success. For a whole nation that had been waiting decades to have a tennis star of their own, it was a moment of shared happiness. Eala was a prodigy from birth, having been born in 2005. Her parents made a choice that would influence her entire life after spotting her aptitude at a young age. She was sent to practice at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Spain when she was barely 11 years old. 11. The majority of children at that age are figuring out middle school. Before she reached adolescence, Alex was already living the life of a professional athlete, competing on clay courts all over the world and away from her family. She improved her skills in the academy. She rose in the ranks, won junior titles, and came to represent Filipino tennis. However, there was a price. Every interview, press conference following a game, and sponsorship agreement carried the burden of anticipation. She wasn't merely having fun. She was performing for a whole country. Additionally, that type of pressure alters you. Eala had already spent more time in the spotlight than most players do in their whole careers by the time she went pro. She had agreements with well-known companies. A federation made significant investments in her success. Each of her managers, coaches, and agents had their own goals. Her life was no longer her own. It was a well-run brand. It appeared flawless from the outside. A rising star who is young, gifted, and marketable. However, insiders always whisper. Rumors circulated that she was no longer in charge of making professional decisions, that she was at odds with her team, and that her schedule was governed by sponsorship responsibilities. Federer then expressed what many had been thinking, but none had the courage to speak it aloud. It's possible that Alex Eala, the tennis star of the Philippines, isn't as free as everyone believed. What precisely did Federer know, then? And why did he decide to talk? Federer now refrained from naming. He did not assign blame. But it was hard to ignore the picture his comments painted. Sources close to the matter claim that Federer was referring to the enormous influence that many parties had over Alice's career. This went beyond job counseling and coaching. This was about a young player who had little freedom of choice due to a complex web of financial obligations, federation demands, and sponsorship commitments. What we know is as follows. Early in her career, Alice negotiated contracts with significant sponsors that had conditions. Social media commitments, tournament scheduling, and appearance standards were determined by what maximized brand publicity rather than what was best for her own growth. She was an extremely valued product. The federation comes next. Alice's career had received substantial funding from the Philippine Tennis Association. Her instruction was paid for by them. They funded her trip. However, there are expectations associated with investment. She wasn't merely defending herself in court. She was the spokesperson for a whole sports program whose funding depended on her success. There was no subtle pressure. Additionally, there was the coaching problem that caused controversy. Several coaching changes in a brief amount of time. Finding the right match was the official narrative each time, but many with first-hand knowledge suggested otherwise. Coaches who defied the timetable and put Eala's long-term growth ahead of immediate outcomes were short-lived. It was an obvious message. Get replaced or fall in line. Federer has previously witnessed this. Under similar pressure, he had witnessed young talents burn out. He had witnessed bright professions fail due to a lack of agency rather than a lack of skill. He also noticed warning indicators when he examined Eala's circumstances. He then raised his voice. Speaking up, however, had repercussions. What was going on with Alex Eala was no longer the only question. It concerned whether Federer had the right to reveal it, whether his worries were sincere, or if he had simply made a young player's life much more difficult. Additionally, there were a lot of thoughts on the internet. There was an instant and intense outcry. Social media was inundated with justifications of Eala from Filipino supporters who were extremely supportive of their tennis star. Federer was accused of going too far, discussing a situation he didn't fully comprehend, and exploiting his position to stir up controversy when none existed. Roger Federer must remain in his own territory. Alex Eala is doing just fine, said one widely shared tweet. A retiring player attempting to stir up drama is not necessary. Others, however, had a different perspective. Federer rarely speaks without a purpose, according to tennis pundits. He was probably telling the truth if he was worried enough to speak out. They mentioned cases that were comparable. Young athletes who appeared destined for success only to burn out due to outside pressure. Every facet of Eala's career was examined in Reddit posts. Patterns that were difficult to ignore surfaced in her tournament calendar, coaching changes, and sponsorship agreements. According to the research, a player may have been pushed too hard in an effort to achieve outcomes that would satisfy everyone but the person holding the racket. The wider ramifications were discussed in women's tennis forums. It wasn't only about Eala. It was about a system that assesses success in sponsorship money rather than personal development, treats young female athletes like commodities, and puts marketability ahead of mental health. Transparency was demanded by certain admirers. They desired to speak with Eala directly. Was she content? Did she think she was in charge of her career? Was Federer right to be concerned? Eala, however, said nothing. Nothing, no social media post, no announcement. And the quiet said so much. The dispute had taken on a life of its own. Federer's innocent remark turned into a heated discussion about control, power, and the hidden costs of being a young tennis star. This was no longer about a single player. This concerned the system as a whole. The tale of Alex Eala turned into a mirror. It revealed unsettling realities about how the tennis industry handles its young stars, particularly young women. The pressure to perform, the sponsorship commitments, and the federations that view players as national assets rather than as unique people with aspirations and limitations. Consider it. How many teenage ladies dream big when they start playing professional tennis only to burn out before turning 25? How many bright careers end because the system fails them rather than because of injuries or a lack of skill? There has long been a mental health epidemic in women's tennis. Players like Simona Halep and Naomi Osaka have publicly discussed the toll that ongoing pressure takes. However, Aya's predicament brought to light another issue: the absence of autonomy. How much of your career is truly yours when you're sponsored by international businesses, managed by agencies, and supported by federations before you're even old enough to cast a ballot? Who is in charge of making the choices? And who gains from your success or failure? Federer's remark brought these issues to light. The fact that the solution is complicated makes them uneasy. Indeed, support networks are essential. Young athletes require financial support, mentoring, and coaching. When does support turn into control, though? When does advice turn into exploitation? The issue was that the tennis community lacked quality responses. Despite its advancements, women's tennis still has issues with how it handles its rising stars. The sport rarely protects them, but it does celebrate and profit from them. Aya's tale wasn't the only one. It was merely the most recent instance of a recurring pattern. Additionally, there will be more Alex Ealas until the system is changed. More young athletes who are torn between their aspirations and the expectations of others. What does this mean for Alex Eala and for us? The tennis community waited for a rebuttal, an explanation, or anything that might make sense of Federer's remark in the days that followed. However, the quiet persisted. Federer did not retract his remarks. He also didn't go into detail. He left it stand after saying what needed to be said. He was respected by some for it. He was chastised by others for dropping a bomb and then leaving. Meanwhile, Alex Eala carried on with her routine. She attended her subsequent competition. She engaged in play. For the cameras, she grinned. On closer inspection, however, a different picture emerged. A level of caution that was unprecedented. A cautious distance during her interviews. Was Federer the target of her rage? Thankful. Are you stuck? No one was aware. Perhaps that was the intention. Perhaps the fact that we were unable to determine was proof of precisely what Federer was cautioning about. A young athlete who was so well managed and in control that even her feelings had to be carefully regulated. In a brief statement, the Philippine Tennis Association defended Aya's support and emphasized their dedication to her growth. It was expertly done. It was ambiguous. It gave no response. Sponsors said nothing. Coaches said nothing. Everyone resumed their regular activities. However, something had changed. The discussion had begun. Now, people were focusing on Alex Eala's health as well as her performance. Not only to her victories, but also to whether she was genuinely all right. Perhaps Federer has always wanted it. Not to ruin her career or spark controversy, but to get people to pay more attention, challenge the system, and show concern for the individual rather than simply the athlete. In all honesty, we might never fully understand Alex Eala's career. We might never be able to determine if